Hello, referees and basketball fans. Welcome to another episode of the Hoops Official. Hoops Official is a platform that aims to help referees advance in their careers. On that note, today I had a chat with Nadine Crowley. Nadine is a Canadian basketball referee, FIBA referee, who has retired from officiating in the year 2012. Currently, she is working at FIBA as an instructor, working on elite referee development. Nadine started telling her story by how her perspective of the game changed every step of the way in her career. She moved from being a player to an official, and from being an official to an instructor. She elaborated the job of an instructor and broke down for us some of the things that they evaluate referees on the court as an instructor. Most importantly, I think she told us in detail what are some of the characteristics of elite referees? What do they do better than the others that put them a step forward in their officiating career? So you got to listen to this episode if you want to learn and take that extra step in your career. Please tune in and share it with your friends who share the same passion for basketball and officiating with you. Thank you. Welcome, Nadine, to Hoops Official. It's a privilege and pleasure to host you and talk about some of the intricacies of officiating.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I was researching for the next referee that I would like to talk to about officiating, and I asked about this to the community for them to recommend a little bit of names, like who should be the next guest in the podcast, and your name came up by multiple people. So I started, looking into your past and your career, and then the research came back with, seeing you have a lot of accolades, a long refereeing career. You started, you came from a basketball family. Your father was a referee, then you had a long refereeing career, and then you became an instructor after that. And I asked every single referee that I interviewed about this journey. What has been the milestones? It's a long career. When you look back, what are some of the things that you remember, highs and lows?
Well, it has been a long career, so I really have to narrow that down. But I think for me, one of the milestones, and I don't know if this is something that's worldwide, but I know in Canada it's an issue, is, I'm really fortunate, and I guess my greatest achievement with refereeing is sustaining my 32-year relationship. In refereeing, it is a lot of demands, and we're passionate about it, so we want to be on the court as much as possible, and we need supportive partners. And a lot of referees here in Canada are divorced. I don't know if it has to do with refereeing, but I have to say, I'm very fortunate that after, the long career, I've sustained this 32-year relationship. So that's my biggest achievement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I need to dig in the stats for Finland as well on this one, just to make sure.
Yeah. So, but besides that, focusing on, I guess, refereeing stuff, some of my biggest, milestones, one of the first one was sort of moving from, being a player to a referee. And, even when I started refereeing for the first, 10 or 15 years, I was still playing. And so you saw the game from that perspective, and I was refereeing like I'd want to be refereed as a player. And so I think that shift from refereeing as a player to refereeing using all of the skills that I have, that was a huge shift for me. And, I'm a slow learner, so that was like 15 or so years into my career, but that was something that I really noticed within myself. And I took note of, and looked at, all right, how am I different now? So that was good. Some other, milestones for me. One of the milestones is, I had the goal of becoming a FIBA referee. And my mentor was the very first female FIBA referee, Janice Deacon. And so because she was my mentor, I really wanted this goal. So I had to do some things in order to achieve that goal. Yeah. And some thing was stepping out of my comfort zone. You're comfortable in the leagues you work. It becomes easy. And so I had to do something different to step out of my comfort zone. And one thing that I did was I went to the United States, sneaking over the border, started reffing in the United States, but also I went to a camp. I went to one of my first American camps at actually American University in around 1996. And it was really out of my comfort zone because we don't, not the same. We don't ref the same rules here. We sort of we used to ref a combination of NCAA and National Federation in Canada at that time, but I had no idea about the rules. And I sat up all night in the bathroom reading the rule book and fretting about my first game. And so, really put myself out of my comfort zone, and then realized once the game started, once the ball went up, we're all the same.
Yeah.
No different. And so that for me was a huge stepping stone towards, I guess, taking control of my career, and doing things that I wasn't comfortable with, which leads to leadership, right? It leads to becoming more than just calling balls and strikes on the floor, right? So, and then, of course, the biggest milestone in 1999 was getting my FIBA card.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge, huge, huge achievement. But it came at a time when I had decided to take a sabbatical.
Okay. Did you get the card first, then sabbatical?
Yes, I got the card first in 99.
Yeah.
And I had in 98, I was at lunch with a buddy, and I saw a VW van, and I decided I'm going to buy that VW van. I'm going to drive around the world in that for a year. So I bought the van. And so in 2000, right after getting my card, I set sail in my VW van. And so I took a year off from refereeing. And so, and so here comes the lows. Taking a year off, you got to start over again, right? It's like starting over again. And so, it was humbling to, realize that after a year, people have moved past you, and you have to, giddy up and get back on that train, right? So I, after a year off, I got my first FIBA assignment, and I hadn't reffed in a year. So I wasn't telling anybody, but that was okay. That went okay. But then that summer after that, I was still playing, and I tore my Achilles tendon. So, and if you know, the rehab for an Achilles tendon is a good 10 months, unless you're a professional athlete and, you get all the bells and whistles, but I'm just a normal person. So, so then it was another 10 months that I was off the court.
All right. Two years almost,
Almost 2 years. Yeah. So that was a huge blow. And that, I think that was something that, and I had control over that, right? But I set myself back 2 years. So that was a bit of a low. So that's really tough when you have injuries, to actually, you have to think about, do I really want this one? And how bad do I want it? Am I willing to put in the work in order to get back to where I was, or to be better? Actually, I didn't want to get back where I was. I wanted to be better. So that happened, and things started to roll, and the highs came again.
Yeah,
the highs came again. And in 2006, I 2 milestones. I first of all refereed the gold medal game of our men's college championships. Which was a huge milestone. And then I was nominated to the Women's World Championships in Brazil. And so that was for me, that was huge. And that sort of, when you set these goals, that was one of my goals, to do that. So that was a great high. That was awesome. And, you're riding a high, and then comes the lows again.
Yeah.
Then comes the lows. Unfortunately, you set goals. So I go to the women's world championships. I go, to junior world championships in 2007. And then 2008 Beijing Olympics comes, and I'm nominated to the pre-Olympic tournament, but not the Olympics.
Yeah. By now I know that it's kind of a dream for every high-level referee. So I can't imagine your frustration or disappointment at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I think it really impacted me.
Yeah.
I didn't think that it would be so difficult to get over that.
What was it that made it, very harsh blow for you?
I think it's a combination of things, and ego is one, and I never see myself as in that way, but I guess I had to own up to it.
Yeah.
And two, I expected to be there, but that's the trick in life, right? Never expect to get something.
Yeah.
Never ever expect that, and I fell into that trap. And I think I expected because I saw my colleagues, the ones that I'd come up with, they were all there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so that was a harsh blow. It was a harsh blow for my ego. It was a harsh blow for okay, what did I do wrong? But, I think the realization was, never expect was one. And two, that, not everything is within your control.
Exactly.
And that's something I always tell my clients, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to me, it's a different.
Easier said than done.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So, but you know what? I truly believe in two things. Everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, it's when, things go south, it's how you respond and what you do about it.
Correct.
And okay, that took me a while. That wasn't like, okay, next day I was dealing with that. No, it took me a while, but I think that was huge growth for me, from disappointment and failure. If you can find the teachable moments in that and grow from it, I think that is the nugget.
Yeah. And were you able to chart a new path for yourself for your officiating career, which that moment played a pivotal role?
Absolutely. So I decided that, all right, that's something I didn't achieve. What are some other goals? What else do you want to do in refereeing?
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things that are maybe within your control, right? So in Canada here, we had two streams. You were either on the women's panel or on the men's panel. So I decided to go to the men's side and I guess meet that challenge. I went to the men's side. I found that it wasn't that much more of a challenge at all. So, and so I stayed with that for a couple of years. And then in Canada, the refereeing is also small.
Yeah.
We don't have all these conferences like they do in the NCAA in the States. I'm in the biggest province in the country, Ontario. And so we had the most universities, 17, but we were split in half. I was living in the east. I live in the capital, Ottawa. So I would work the east universities and not work the south universities or the southwestern universities. So the pool was quite small. 7 or 8 schools I would go to. Well, it gets a little kind of tiresome after a while. Yeah. So I decided that, all right, everybody has a shelf life. And so I decided that I'll move into something different. And so here I started to move towards being a referee coach, working with younger officials. I started a mentorship program here in my city for, sort of disadvantaged youth. And so that for me was huge.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful. So I started doing that locally, provincially, and nationally. So that's how I got into sort of referee coaching.
All right.
And still refereeing at a local level,
not easy to completely, set that aside unless you have an injury or something. It's just being on the court is still something else if you're loving basketball as an official, right?
Yeah. And I had another injury. I tore my other Achilles tendon.
All right. Are you warming up enough, Nadine, before the now point?
Hey, now I don't have to
Yeah.
because they're both mechanical. So
All right.
I don't have that issue. But
Okay.
but that was my weakness, was my Achilles tendon.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to ask you like two questions based on some of the
Sure.
things I picked up in your introduction of or the brief history of your officiating career. You mentioned in a couple of places that moving from being a stakeholder as a basketball player to another stakeholder and official has changed your perspective on the game just now. And in some other place, I read that your perspective also have shifted after you made the switch to become a coach / instructor. So maybe we could talk about a little bit, because this is something I experienced as well. When I stopped playing and went on to become an official, my understanding of the game completely changed. It's almost we were playing two different games in our minds. So what has been this like for you from player to official to instructor? And maybe you can touch upon a little bit your role as a FIBA elite referee instructor, and what do you do? How does that work as a career?
Sure. So from player to official, I was a point guard. And so, I really focused on, when I was refereeing, more so the peripheral play and not as much the post play. I was really a little bit more lenient on the guards, just thinking about the way I wanted to be ref, right?
Yeah.
The other pieces, I knew that, the point guards was your tunnel into the team. They were the gatekeepers. And
Right.
so I knew that those were the people that if I needed something done, maybe a player to be calmed down or, whatever, I knew to go to the point guard.
Right.
That was
This is
the
something.
leader.
This is something came up in some other interview as well. Like the emotional leader or the technical leader of the team, and conveniently, actually, or coincidentally, most of them are the point guards. I used to be a point guard myself, so I was one of those players. So that's why it sounds all too familiar what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So that for me, changed when, as I grew as a referee, learned more about the game. Well, I knew a lot about I thought I knew a lot about the game, but I knew a lot about the game from a player's perspective. I also coached a bit and refereed too. But I think, when I became a referee coach, something that changed for me was back in the day. Okay, back in the day, the referee instructors used to be more like in your face and, throwing clipboards, and they'd be all angry and emotional about the game and your game. And it was like, I was the one on the court. Why are you so emotional?
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to change that culture. And because I always thought, like, this is so inappropriate.
Yeah, I mean, being an official is hard to begin with anyway, so you don't need the instructor come at you anyways. I mean, like, everybody is onto you on the court,
Yeah.
You could use a friend.
Yeah,
After that,
right. That's right.
Yeah, thanks for doing the good work. I mean,
That's right. So I wanted to be, a support, an ally, somebody who, was championing referees as opposed to tearing them down, right? And so that's sort of, for me, moving from, sort of referee to referee coach, I wanted to bring that with me. I wanted to instill and create a different culture here by being supportive. And so, I've learned over the years, because it's not an easy job. It's not an easy transition going from refereeing to refereeing coach.
Yeah.
because as a referee coach, you have to see the holistic, you have to see the whole picture, right? As a referee, you're focused on certain things. Yeah, as a crew chief, you know, you're focused on everything and you have to be aware of everything, but there's still aspects that you're not aware of when you're a referee coach and seeing the play from a distance.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can see everything that's going on at one time. But, you know, so for me, it was a huge sort of growth trajectory. You know, when I was first a referee coach, I don't think I was very effective, very good. But now I think that with the training through FIBA, with working different tournaments and with people and getting feedback, you know, I think I've grown quite a bit with respect to being able to see the game from the referee's perspective and also from my perspective, right? And doing that, and to help me to do that in a post game is really to have a discussion with the referees.
Yeah.
Right.
I've just you know, I wanna make it a little bit more concrete.
Mhm.
I was just in a camp where I, you know, had instructors coming to the field and talking to me about, you know, how the game went, etc., etc. And the feedback can vary from you know, very minuscule stuff, like, I don't know, your signaling, for example, to your mechanics, you know, a little bit more fundamental aspects of refereeing. At the level you're at the elite level, what are the things that you're looking at on the court? What does a feedback to a official look like from an instructor?
Okay, it does change. So if there's a game where there was an incident, maybe a last 2-minute incident, I'd just go right to that and
Okay.
deal with that, right? Hopefully the referees recognize that there was an incident. If they don't, then that's another piece we talk about. But that's something we go directly to is dealing with the situation at hand. Okay.
All right.
If it's just been a normal game, I would really start out with, and because I want to create a discussion, like I might have some points. And really, I try to, you know, as a FIBA referee instructor, we're supposed to only be, excuse me, be in the post game for about 20, 25 minutes max, right? Because you don't want to relive the whole game.
Yeah.
They've already spent almost 2 hours out there on the court. But so I'll start by just asking, so tell me 1 or 2 things that you did well, each individual. And then I'll ask, as a crew, what did you do well? And that also, it also tells me, you know, matches to see if it matches up with my own notes.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'll ask, so, you know, what could you have done better? What would you do differently next time? Sort of those sorts of things. If there have been unsportsmanlike fouls in the game, I have to go to those to obtain the criteria under which they call the unsportsmanlike fouls, and we'll break down the unsportsmanlike foul. Maybe there's something that they did. Maybe their mechanics. Maybe they weren't using the proper protocol. So we'll talk about that. You know, if there's technical fouls, we'll talk about that. Just get them to discuss, you know, what happened, what led up to it, what, you know, and maybe mechanics again, talking a bit about that. Then one of the biggest things we look for overall when you look at the holistic picture is game control. That's the number one piece for us as referee instructors. You know,
what does game control mean to you in that sense, if you could break it down a little bit?
Yeah, I break it down into 2 categories. You know, one is behavior of the players, coaches, benches. You know, also self-management of their own emotions. with respect to how they can regulate themselves and the way they're making the calls, and how that self-regulation or lack of self-regulation attributed to certain calls, right? Game control, and with play calling, there's also game control there. And also the other portion of game control is the technical game control. Were they good with the clocks? Substitutions, were they in control of the table, the timeouts, all of that sort of stuff, dead ball, officiating. So those to me are sort of the categories in which we look at with respect to game control, and it encompasses a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, like you said, I'm going to break it down to two things, but that's a very comprehensive list, because each one of those categories come with a wealth of things that the referees need to take care of. And that is one of the most difficult thing maybe non-referees don't understand about officiating, is that for everything you just listed, most of the time you have a split-second time to process and make a decision. You make a foul call, and at the same time, for example, you need to check the time, you need to check the table if there is a substitution request. All that is happening within a second or two maximum. So
yeah,
not easy. I always say it's one of the hardest things I've done in my life. I'm very honest about it.
Yeah, it is so hard. Some of the other things we look for, are they adhering to the protocols? Right? Like protect the shooter, dead ball, the IoTs, are they utilizing the IoTs? Also, their play calling, are they processing the play, seeing the start, develop, and finish before making a decision? And mechanics, right? Because it's the mechanics that lead to the play calling, the accuracy and quality calls. So, and their court presence, right? Do they look like they want to be there? That's a big thing, right? Do they look like they want to be there? Are they believable when they make a call, right? How do they regroup after they've kicked a call, right? Or after a coach has yelled at them? Right? Are they able to get back into the game? And those sorts of things. So
as if refereeing on its own was not hard enough, it's also a performance. You need to look believable, you need to look confident, you need to look like you're enjoying the whole thing when somebody is on your ear and yelling at you, all that stuff put together. But I mean, I guess for the love of basketball, I'm happy to do it for some reason. All right, so you've listed a list of things that you look at. Thank you very much for that. I think it's been very useful. I'll actually going to make a checklist and try and see how do I do on the weekend games with these points that you just provided. But then when looking at these things that you listed, and you have seen a lot of referees on the court, you watch them, you coach them. What are some characteristics of elite referees that make them kind of the referees that they are?
Court presence.
Court presence.
I remember I think it was at the Olympics. I was a referee coach on one of the games, and there was a referee from Puerto Rico, and he's just phenomenal. But his court presence, I've never seen that before. And when the coach was up, gesturing, yelling, or whatever, and he just looked at him, and the hair stood up on my arms. Like I was like, sit down. just the look was like, and the coach just sort of sheepishly sat down and I thought, wow, that is magic. Like that is something you can't teach. That is something that he has, that is just, and he's very, that court presence that, okay, you can command the court just with a look or just with your stature or, but also being able to switch to being charismatic,
right?
To being able to communicate your message so that people get it and they believe you.
Yeah.
So that to me is like, that was gold, and that sets referees apart. The ability to communicate, effectively and relate with others. That's huge. Like, you can have the most accurate call selection and whatnot, but if you can't communicate with people, that's not going to, get you very far. The other thing is, elite referees make their partners look great.
That's interesting. So it's not just about them being an
No,
elite
no,
referee.
no.
Yeah.
It's not about them. They understand everything about the game, and that it's not about them, and that they, their role as a leader, that, they bring all those great leadership skills to the fore, and it's about, the team. I think that, they're intelligent and have a high emotional intelligence. I think that's an important piece. And then all the other skills that come with it, right? Consistency, integrity, humility, and not one ref has all of those things, but I think they're decisive, they're poised and calm, that confidence, you see that in their court presence. They have good judgment, and to boot, they make quality calls and really good common sense decisions on the court.
Right on. That's another comprehensive list. I think I will take this list one thing at a time. So let's start with the court presence, and then move on to the other items on the list. But thank you very much, and I'd like to continue on this leadership bit that you mentioned, which is a characteristics of elite referees. And this was a question that came through the community as well. So this was about being a crew chief. What are some characteristics of a good crew chief? You said that, for example, making your partners look good, is it inherently a crew chief characteristic? How do you handle conflict within the team? After all, we're all human beings. You might not like a certain person that you're officiating with, etc. These things happen. So any advices, any examples that you can share from your career that happened to you or that you have seen happening to somebody?
To be a good crew chief, it's really important that you really study how to be a good leader. It's not something, and unfortunately it happens these days. People get put in the role of crew chief young in their careers, or even older in their careers, but they don't understand what the role entails. Right. And so I think that as referees, we have to do some work off the court in order to fine tune those skills, because you don't just get them automatically,
For sure.
You have to read up and do some research on leadership. What does leadership mean? What does leadership look like? How can I practice leadership on a daily basis? Not just on the court. You have to do it in your life. Right. And it's about giving of oneself and like I said, making the people around you look and feel good, right? Being inclusive, being being a different type of leader when the situation calls for it. So sometimes you can be laissez-faire, sometimes you have to be autocratic. Right? Depending on the situation. So you have to know, you have to have that sense as to know when you need to do that. Right. So I encourage people to do some work in that. Because that's a tough thing. And over my career, like that was something that was, was up and down. I always saw myself as a leader, more of a quiet sort of type, but sort of more leading from behind or the side. But I think there's always times in your career when you've run into these difficult situations that probably you didn't handle that well.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, you go back when you're feeling better to find the teachable moments, right? To teach you to grow your leadership skills.
Yeah.
I remember one a couple of times I remember this. I remember refereeing with a veteran referee here who was saying, you're too emotional on the court. You need to, and she referred me to a book, The Philosophy of Officiating. It's an old book.
Right?
Right?
The philosophy of fish eating.
Officiating.
Officiating. Yeah. I was like, philosophy of fish eating. Okay.
Oh, officiating.
That's a metaphor that just like, Oof.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Good. Officiating.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm on board. Let's go.
Yeah. So referring me to that really helped me to, to look at the different types of leadership, but also to look at what I needed to do to self-regulate.
Yeah.
Whether it's breathing. I started doing yoga after that,
Okay.
just to help me with my breathing, to help me on the court. And when I'm not feeling comfortable or getting yelled at, the free stance and the breathing, like it changed my refereeing. It was great, right?
Okay.
But you can do that and you can change, but it always comes back to bite you in some way. Yeah. Well, one of 2007, I was at the Junior Worlds. And in Bratislava, and I had a game. With a referee from Cuba who didn't speak English, and I think a referee from the Ukraine. So we planned to. I was the crew chief, so we planned to get there at a certain time to do a pregame. And so I get there, and I'm waiting, and so the one guy comes in but we couldn't really communicate because he couldn't speak English, right? But we tried. Anyways, the third referee didn't show up until right before we went out onto the court.
All right.
And so I was livid. Like I could barely function. I was so mad. I don't think I've ever been that mad in my life. And I think I was mad because I felt disrespected.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew as a woman, because back then they didn't nominate a lot of women as crew chiefs.
Right.
So I knew that was going to be my first hurdle. All right. So I think I sort of hyped myself up about that too much. And so that's what got to me. So I didn't regulate my emotions.
Okay.
And in that game, it was an awful game. It was so ugly. Like we were like fighting against each other for calls. And I call a jump ball and he comes out with an unsportsmanlike, and it was just awful, right?
Yeah.
Awful. And then the coach she's screaming, and so I go over to her, and he's like, he was ready. I could see he was ready to tear up. So I went over, and she had a right to be screaming because the call wasn't very good. And so I go over and I just talk to her, and I walk her back to the bench. I said, "Listen, you got to work with me here because this is not going well." So I said, you were both in this together, the only two women out here. So you got to work with me, right?
All right.
And so she calmed down, but it was awful. It was the worst. But I let my emotions get the better of me. And in my post game, I got ripped apart. I took full blame for that. I'm the crew chief. I got to take that, right? So for me, that was a huge lesson in, it doesn't matter what's going on. You have to control your emotions, and you can't let somebody else have an impact on you. It's about the game. It's not about you. It's about the game. And so, you need to focus on that. So that I think as a crew chief, that was a huge learning moment for me.
And how do you this self-regulation when it comes to emotions of the core? It applies to whether you're the crew chief or one of the other officials as well. One thing I want to understand from this example that you just give, how you being the crew chief had like an amplifying effect. Is it because you couldn't establish the general game control together with your crew?
Because I felt that I couldn't bring my crew together.
Okay.
I felt that loss of control with respect to bringing the team together. I also felt disrespected. When people feel disrespected, that's a huge thing. Right.
Yeah.
And so the other thing, I was also mad at myself for being so mad.
Yeah.
so it's like a self-defeating thing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and
really...
I was breathing, I was doing everything I needed to do, but it was bigger than me.
Yeah. You really didn't give yourself much standing chance there.
No,
everything has to be considered. Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't talk to him because I just wanted to throat punch him. Right. So it's like.
But I mean, this is a great example because, like, ego is something all of us share, and you definitely sound like you were disrespected because somebody didn't show up, on the time they were supposed to show up, which means that they're not respecting your time and the other referee's time, who you weren't able to talk to because of the language barrier. Anyways, like, in general, I think, especially in the youth levels, when you don't have much experience how to cope with that, becomes a problem. It starts to trigger your fight or flight response when somebody comes at you, disrespects you in different ways. And maybe something like, we can use this as a tangent to go there a little bit, and then talk about some of your advices that you could give, especially from a youth referee point of view who's not very experienced. Maybe I can give you, for example, a couple of phrases that the coaches or players come to the referees, and then you could maybe, just as a role play, give me a practical advice as to how to respond to that. Would that be okay?
Sure, that's fine.
So one of the things that I have heard quite commonly, you make a call and the player comes to you with a big conviction and then like an emotional gesture saying that, no, I did not touch the person at all. It was all ball. You cannot call that. And this is a statement. You can't really argue with that, but it's an emotional statement you need to somehow respond to. Otherwise, it just grows bigger in some cases. What would be the proper response for something as simple as this?
You deal with the emotion.
Yeah.
It's just like in social work.
Yeah.
It's not that the issue is not that they didn't foul it. It's the emotion that comes from it.
Okay.
So it's about, what, I hear you. I'll work a little harder to get in a better position. Or I hear you. Or just tell them what you saw, right? I saw your left hand. I just, I saw your left hand come across his right arm, which made him fall or lose the ball.
Yeah.
So, that's illegal contact and I have to call that.
All right.
I said, but I hear you. It's, it's your third foul. And I said, but,
Oh, that's very good. So deal with the emotion and give a technical answer as to why you call it, if that is necessary at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Another questions. Another complaint. Actually, this happened to me just now in the camp I was in. I made a call on the baseline. I went to the table to show it, and as I was rotating from being a lead to being a center, I've heard that the coach is complaining about my call to the other referee, and saying, even you have seen it. That's not a foul. He's not making good calls. So, bad mouthing about me to the other referee. So now putting myself in the shoes of the other referee who has to respond to that, what will be the proper response? Especially, for example, in some cases, you don't really actually see the call. You don't see what the other referee called exactly because you're watching another box of the court. So what would be the proper response to it?
Well, I don't know what the proper response to it, but my response would be, like, coach, my partner's working hard for you tonight, just like all three of us are.
Okay.
So, if you have a question about a call, let me know.
Right. I like it because, you're
things. I'm telling the coach that, in a positive way, we're working hard. And it depends on the language the coach uses. If the coach is, saying something super negative about you, then I address that.
Okay.
Right. And I would just say, we're not going to talk like that about my crew. We're working hard for you. If you've got a question, let me know. The other thing is I'm telling them that they can talk to me if they have questions. I don't respond to statements. I respond to questions.
Yeah.
And questions about a certain call, not every call. Like, coach, tell me which call you're referring to.
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty solid advice. So it's just really take in whatever it is the coach is saying, process it, and then if it is something that you can, and a goodwill respond. If not, if it is, really bad mouthing, then we shouldn't allow that.
That's right.
We shouldn't allow that. All right. Okay, we're almost on top of the hour. I've had many more questions to you, but maybe we do the second episode, a sequel to this at some point. But I will just want to give you the space to talk about a little bit about future of basketball officiating. What are the opportunities? What are the threats you're seeing? Because rules are getting more complex. Technology is getting more embedded. And this is my purely subjective opinion that the gap between a fan's understanding of the game and referee's understanding of the game has grown a little bit bigger compared to what it used to be, because of this intricacies of the rules. So what are your thoughts? What do you see as the threats and opportunities for basketball officiating?
Well, I think one of the interesting things that FIBA's done is with the IRS, putting that up on the TV screen so that people can listen in on what the refs' conversations. I think that's really helped the understanding of how the refs see the game and the understanding of why they make that call, right? Why they come out with that decision. The other piece behind the scenes is that I think it's fantastic how the FIBA referee department has really created protocols around a lot of different things, but the IRS procedure. And so the referees have the language and how to talk to each other and what to say at the monitor, how to go through the play. And so have really provided a lot of structure and guidance for referees so that they're consistent, right? And that they're communicating the proper information in an effective and efficient manner. So I think that the continual growth within the FIBA referee department around breaking down things and creating these protocols, I think is really, really helpful for referees. Referees, I need this. I need to know where to stand. I need, the X on the floor. I need that. And so I think that, being spoon-fed these things, I think it really helped providing the structure. What else? I think that, a change, especially since COVID, we've lost a lot of referees since COVID. But I think something that's really changed in the game is sort of referee abuse, the hostility of fans, and they're so close in proximity, right? Like they're right there on the end lines, on the sidelines, right? So we're quite vulnerable. But what that leads to is a huge challenge in referee retention. Nobody wants to pull.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And so after a year or two, we lose a lot of referees to referee abuse. So this has to change, right? And I know in Canada, we've tried a lot of different things. We've tried, the player's statement at the beginning of the games, reading it out to their parents that they're going to behave and that it's going to be, a sportsmanlike event and this and that. That didn't work. They tried clearing, the gym and, and only having just the teams in there. And, that wasn't good. So I don't know how it's going to change, but that's something that I think for me really needs to be, seriously considered. The other big change for me that I think is going in a great direction, like the rules are fine and they're really breaking them down a lot more and looking at the language, which is good. But I think what's greatly improved, and it might be subjective for me, but the best change in the past few years for me is that FIBA changed the language and the diagrams and pictures, making the rule book more inclusive. So they changed the language. It's not the best gender inclusive language, but it is gender inclusive. So they've changed it. And, I'm super happy about that, because I think that with respect to looking at referee retention or just having an interest in it, when you can see as a female yourself reflected in the rules and on the page, then that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I think you have pointed out some of the things that I definitely have been thinking about. The for example, the referee abuse thing. It's I think one of the impossible problems to solve. We want fans, we want them to be passionate about, but then it has implications on the court, especially towards referees, obviously towards the opponents, players, and coaches as well. But referees usually have no ally other than themselves on the court, so that's a big problem. And I'm a big fan of making IRS a little bit more self-explanatory. Hold this protocol, you hear what they're talking on the microphone, you see what they're looking at. That helped a great deal as a fan for me to understand and enjoy those moments, rather than just dead ball moments where we wait for something.
Wait. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. We wait for referees to invent something so that the game can continue. Thank you, Nadine. This has been extremely helpful for myself, and I'm sure for everybody who is going to tune into this episode. I wanted to get some more technical officiating related information out of you, but we didn't have time for it. Maybe, as I said, another time. But thank you for today, and thank you for taking time to share your advice with us.
My pleasure. It's wonderful to have met you, and thank you so much for providing this opportunity for me. I'm really thankful and appreciative.